Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're here because, well, just like us, you want to get a quick, solid grasp on important topics.
And today, we're really digging into something specific. School-based prevention programs for Indigenous students.
Right, across the USA and Canada.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's a critical area. The research consistently shows that while Indigenous communities possess these incredibly strong, vibrant cultures,
Mm-hmm.
they also face these persistent gaps, disparities in mental health, academic
No,
outcomes.
often linked to bigger systemic issues.
Exactly. Things like systemic racism, historical trauma, the impacts are still felt. So
Yeah.
schools become these really potentially powerful settings for preventative support.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack how culturally relevant these programs actually are.
Yeah, based on a big review of the research.
Tell us about the sources. What did this review look at?
Sure. So the researchers pulled together articles published over about a decade, from January 2010 through February 2021.
Yeah.
And they were specifically looking for studies that had, descriptions of programs or outcome data.
Like whether they worked.
Right, or even just details on how the programs were developed and put into practice with Indigenous students in the U.S. and Canada.
And you mentioned it was a big review.
Oh, yeah. The scale was pretty impressive. They started with, get this, over 2,100 articles. 2131, I
Right.
think. And then through their process, they narrowed it right down to 35 key articles.
And those covered.
Those 35 papers described 27 distinct interventions. So it gives you a really solid look at what's been happening.
Okay, definitely provides depth. So let's get into it.
Right.
What were these 27 interventions actually focusing on?
Well, this is where you see a definite pattern. The review found that the large majority, 20 of the 27 programs,
Most of them, then.
yeah, the bulk of them were focused on either preventing substance use or dealing with sexual and reproductive health.
Okay, substance use and sexual health. And who are they mainly aimed at? Which age group?
Primarily adolescents. Think middle school and high school students. That seemed to be the target for most of those specific programs.
Which makes sense. That's often when those risks emerge more strongly.
Yeah.
But what about other things, like mental health support or help with schoolwork?
And that's a really, really crucial point the review brings up. It potentially flags a gap
How so?
because there were far fewer programs, only 5 out of the 27, that explicitly focused on mental health or social emotional learning or, academic support.
Only 5. That's quite an imbalance compared to the 20 on substance use and sexual health.
It is, and it makes you wonder, right? Does this reflect funding? Or maybe like a historical focus on tackling immediate crises?
Could be.
But it does raise that question, are we maybe overlooking the foundational things, the mental wellness, the academic skills that could actually prevent some of those later crises?
Mm.
Would a more holistic approach work better long term?
Definitely food for thought. Okay, so we have this mix of focuses, but was there a common thread regarding culture? Did these 27 programs consider cultural aspects?
Yes, absolutely. That was a major finding. Every single one of the 27 interventions they analyzed was identified as being culturally consonant.
Culturally consonant. Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
It basically means the programs were designed or maybe tweaked to align with Indigenous cultures.
So they fit culturally.
Right. But, and this is interesting, the review noted that how they achieved that cultural fit, well, it wasn't always the same method.
So different ways to get there.
Exactly. They highlighted 2 main approaches. First, what they called culturally grounded interventions. There were 11 of those.
Culturally grounded. What makes an intervention grounded?
That means it was developed right from the start, from the foundation up, based on the specific values, beliefs, practices of a particular Indigenous cultural group.
So built by and for that culture, essentially.
Pretty much. Built on that cultural foundation.
That sounds like it would lead to a really strong fit.
Yeah.
Did they say anything about where these grounded programs came from?
They did note that one of the culturally grounded ones was actually community initiated.
Oh, interesting. So grassroots.
Yeah, suggesting it really bubbled up from the community itself based on their needs and their perspectives, which is powerful.
Definitely. Okay, so that's the grounded approach. What was the other main way?
The second one was culturally adapted interventions. And there were more of these 17 in the review.
Okay, adapted. How does that differ from grounded?
Think of it like this. You take an existing program, maybe one that's worked elsewhere, in a different setting.
Right.
And then you carefully tailor it. You modify the content, maybe the materials, even how it's delivered to make it fit better, make it more meaningful for a specific Indigenous group's culture and experience.
Gotcha. So one is built from scratch culturally, the other is customized. Makes sense. Now, we know they were all culturally relevant in some way. Can we dig into the how a bit more? What kinds of cultural elements were actually woven in, even generally?
Yeah, the review gives us some good general insights, even without naming every single program's specifics, especially for those more common areas like substance use and sexual health.
Okay, let's start there. What did cultural relevance look like in these substance use programs?
Well, for example, some might incorporate traditional ecological knowledge, connecting with the land, traditional ways of life, framing those as protective
Hmm,
factors.
interesting.
Others involved elders, community leaders, drawing on their wisdom, their cultural authority in delivering the program. And things like storytelling, a really core practice in many indigenous cultures, was used to share messages about health.
Right, using those established cultural pathways. What about the sexual and reproductive health side?
Yeah.
Similar integration.
Yeah, similar ideas, trying to frame sexual health in a culturally appropriate way. So maybe discussions about traditional family structures or community roles and responsibilities.
Contextualizing it.
Exactly.
Huh.
Using culturally relevant teachings about relationships, respect, sometimes even integrating traditional healing views or practices around wellness.
So definitely moving beyond just a generic health message. Now, what about those fewer programs? The mental health, the social emotional learning, the academic ones, did they also have cultural components?
They did. The review indicated that even though there were fewer, they also incorporated cultural aspects. For instance, some mental health programs use talking circles.
The traditional practice, right?
Yes, for open sharing and support. And the social emotional learning programs sometimes wove in indigenous values like interconnectedness, respect for elders, community focus.
And academics.
Even there, you might see incorporating indigenous knowledge, histories, perspectives into the curriculum itself, which, can indirectly boost well-being and engagement too.
That link seems really important. Culture boosting well-being, maybe boosting academics.
Yeah.
Did the review comment on that connection specifically?
It did, yeah. It suggested that when these prevention programs are culturally relevant and when they include that social emotional learning piece,
Mm-hmm.
it can create this sort of positive upward spiral that actually helps with academic success too.
Okay, how might that work? What's the mechanism linking cultural relevance, SEL, and doing better in school?
Well, the review points to a couple of things. One is just strengthening that sense of cultural identity and belonging.
Feeling connected.
Right. When students feel more connected to their culture, it can boost their self-esteem, their overall well-being,
Yeah.
and that makes them more invested, more motivated learners.
That makes intuitive sense. Feeling seen and valued is huge for engagement.
Totally. And then there are the SEL skills themselves: self-awareness, managing emotions, relating to others, making good decisions.
Life skills, basically.
Exactly. And when those skills are taught in a way that resonates culturally, they can be particularly powerful for Indigenous students. Helps them navigate challenges, build good relationships, all stuff that supports a better school experience.
So it's not just about stopping bad things, it's also about building up the good stuff that helps academically.
Precisely. It's about fostering that supportive, culturally affirming school environment where students can really thrive, across the board.
Okay. Now, there was one other thing, kind of a side note in the review, about language, about terminology.
Ah, yes, that's important context. The review authors included a note basically saying, look, the terms we're using to describe Indigenous peoples in the studies we analyzed
Hmm.
might not be the terms everyone prefers today. But, they clarified, these were the terms used in the literature they were reviewing.
Right. Why flag that?
It's really about showing awareness and respect while we're discussing the findings using the language from the source.
Has he had?
Yeah. It's just crucial to remember that language matters, it evolves, and respect means using terms preferred by the individuals and communities themselves. That note signals they understood that sensitivity.
Absolutely. A good reminder about the weight of words and respecting self-identification. Okay, let's try and pull this all together. Key takeaways from this deep dive.
Okay, so big picture. Most school programs for Indigenous youth in the US and Canada, at least in that 2010-2021 window, focused heavily on substance use and sexual health, usually for teens.
Right, that imbalance.
But the good news, all 27 programs in the review were seen as culturally consonant. They tried to align with Indigenous cultures.
Through those two main ways.
Exactly. Either built from the ground up, culturally grounded, or by adapting existing programs culturally adapted.
And even the fewer programs on mental health, SEL, academics, they also wove in cultural elements. And there's this potential link.
Yeah, a potential link between culturally relevant prevention, social emotional learning, and better academic outcomes for Indigenous students. It all seems interconnected.
Okay, so that leaves us, and everyone listening, with a question to chew on.
Definitely. Thinking about the challenges Indigenous students face, but also the incredible cultural strengths they bring. What's the ideal balance here?
Hmm.
How can schools, best tackle immediate risk with prevention programs while also really nurturing that long-term well-being, that academic success in ways that are deeply authentically rooted in culture?
That's a complex but really vital question. It hits on that need for a holistic approach.
And maybe it gets you thinking too, how could these ideas, culturally relevant design, grounding programs and community values apply in other areas you care about
Hmm.
with other groups?
True, the principles might travel.
Could be broadly relevant.
Well, this has certainly given us a valuable look at just how critical cultural relevance is for supporting Indigenous students. Thanks for diving deep with us.
My pleasure.
Until our next deep dive, keep exploring.